I know that a lot of people believe whatever because they don't understand and they don't know.
André Rieu, who became wealthy performing waltzes, has now cancelled all of his plans following a horrific breakdown. He was 74 years old when his body finally gave out. In Mexico City, he has abdicated power to his son, who has already sent crowds packing and cancelled concerts. Surprisingly, despite his oath to perform until he is 140 years old, the guy who owns 80 homes and performs 100 acts a year may be compelled to retire. If this is his last concert in Maastricht, it may be the end of the road. The musical prodigy André Rieu came from a dysfunctional household in Maastricht, Netherlands, where he was born in 1949. As the Maastricht Symphony Orchestra's leader, his father was a stern guy who valued discipline over love. As the third of 6 siblings, André had a family life more akin to a military base than a typical childhood home. Kindness and embraces were unusual. The discipline and quiet of their rigorous Roman Catholic upbringing were deeply ingrained in his parents. They were quite serious and reserved, and they hardly joked around. My parents didn't love me very much. It wasn't an assumption. It was a profound belief that remained with André from an early age. The icy manner of his parents was at odds with André's boundless enthusiasm. Teachers' criticism of André as an artist was an affront to his mother, who was too preoccupied with her son's academic performance and music lessons. Without peak performance, André felt completely unnoticed by that type of thinking. Maybe the emptiness he felt as a youngster was the impetus that would lead him to transform the way people across the world hear classical music. He spent a lot of time in therapy trying to figure out why. Strange things occurred to André when he was 5 years old. He fell head over heels for his violin instructor, rather than the instrument itself. Blonde and stunning, she was 18 years old. Because she kept drawing his focus away from his teachings, he hardly paid attention at all. On the other hand, he had a daily motivation to practice his instrument because of his crush. He only wished he could play like her, without worrying about scales or technique. André studied her technique, her gestures, and her sound. And in a matter of weeks he had mastered vibrato, the emotional wobble in sound that gives music its life, while his classmates were still having trouble with simple notes. What stayed with him was the passion, not the perfection. His relationship with his father became increasingly strained as he matured. André aspired to bring classical music to life by making it lively, entertaining, and full of delight instead of rigid and somber. However, such concept was offensive to his father. "I didn't educate you to do waltzes," André's father said in a chilly rejection when André expressed an interest in playing waltzes. Upon André's return home with Marjorie, his future wife, the atmosphere was even chillier. His mother was less than welcome. She urged André to return to his tidy room and told her to leave. For me, that was the last straw. After leaving with Marjorie, he didn't turn around. Even though he was selling out venues across the globe after that, his parents still never made it to one of his performances. His dad passed away in 1992, thus he never got to witness André's transformation. In spite of this, André was plotting something. He began to notice something odd when performing with his father's orchestra. The majority of the players didn't appear to be really invested in the music. It was dull because they moaned about the weather and their salaries. Then, during the encores, the audience would go wild when the orchestra played waltzes by Strauss. A shift in vibe occurred as everyone hummed and grinned. Not to win over critics, but to move people. That was when André realized he wanted to perform music like this. When he was younger, he sang a gentle serenade for a dying woman who had been unconscious for days. She opened her eyes to the sound of the music. The significance of emotion, not perfection, became clear to André at that moment. At that point, the seed of an idea to found his own orchestra started to germinate. André founded the Maastricht Salon Orchestra with a small group of musicians in 1978, when he was 29 years old, with a newborn son at home and little financial resources. They performed lost salon music and old-fashioned waltzes at weddings, town halls, and border villages near Belgium and Germany. They weren't making much money, and it wasn't glamorous, but André didn't care. He was engrossed in his passion. On one occasion, during a modest performance, he performed Gold and Silver Waltz by Franz Lehár with all his heart. He sensed a transformation. The music seemed to communicate with him. It was that night that he made up his mind. Critics may have thought it was corny, but he couldn't care less whether the elite made fun of it. He was determined to spread the message that classical music could be upbeat and joyous until others agreed. It was 1987 that André Rieu reached a crossroads in his life. After over a decade at the helm of the Maastricht Salon Orchestra, something seemed odd about this nearly 40-year-old conductor. The novelty had worn off, the boundaries had been defined, and the previous style just wasn't cutting it. More was what he desired. As a conductor, he sought to bring back the thrill and spectacle of Johann Strauss's violin performances when he would move his entire body to the music. He didn't only want to play music. He wanted to create magic. It was that vitality, that joy, that feeling of being alive. Rieu yearned to restore it. It wasn't a simple choice, though. Launching a brand new venture required a tremendous leap of faith. He lacked the financial means to hire professional musicians. The financial burden on his own shoulders increased with each musician he hired. The classical music industry wasn't exactly known for its daring, and bookings were murky, but he felt compelled to give it a go. Johann Strauss Orchestra, his latest invention, debuted on January 1, 1988. Something about the intimate setting, with only 12 musicians and a tiny audience, felt special. Rieu broke all the norms. The orchestra wasn't dressed in black, as is customary, and the stage was far from silent and stuffy. Theatrical flair, folk music, dramatic lighting, and laughter were all elements he introduced. Skeptics panned it, describing it as tacky and inexpensive. In spite of this, the crowd cheered, grinned, and became active. A spark had been ignited, and Rieu was determined not to let it die. After that, the turning point arrived. In May 1995, while Ajax and Bayern Munich were playing in the UEFA Champions League final in Vienna, something out of the ordinary occurred during halftime. Rieu and his orchestra came out onto the field and played Waltz No. 2 by Dmitri Shostakovich. The song had become famous in the Netherlands thanks to a TV commercial, but nobody anticipated what happened next. All 50,000 football fans in the stadium began to sway, hum, and become engrossed in the music. It was completely unprecedented. 300 million viewers in Europe were able to see the live broadcast. A cultural tsunami, not only a halftime performance. Following its release a year prior, Rieu's album Strauss & Company sold 200,000 CDs in the weeks that followed. For 19 weeks in a row, it topped the Dutch album charts, solidifying its position as the best-selling album in the country this decade. Even those who had no interest in classical music began to buy his recordings, attend his concerts, and develop a deep appreciation for waltz music. In the eyes of the experts, the football match was the turning point when André Rieu went from being a musician to a cultural icon. However, not everyone were enthusiastic. He was met with strong resistance from the classical music community, who accused him of being dishonest, disrespecting tradition, and transforming centuries-old music into a show. A renowned conductor was even called musical pornography in one scathing assessment. The critics despised the garish costumes, the cheesy arrangements, the enormous scenery, and the stage gags. When Rieu constructed a miniature Schönbrunn Palace in 2008 for use as a stage background, complete with ice rinks, horses, and fountains, the situation escalated even further. The EUR 34 million price tag shocked purists. Rieu, however, remained unwavering. Everyone, not just seasoned musicians in arenas, should be able to enjoy music, in his opinion. He wished for the release of music that had been stifled by rigid conventions so that everyone, students, teachers, and housekeepers, could appreciate it. It was impossible to deny. He had a legion of devoted followers. People danced in the aisles, bought a plethora of CDs, and filled his shows. Strauss & Company had been making noise since 1994, but their 1995 performance sent them soaring. It achieved an unprecedented feat for classical music in Germany, where it peaked at number 5, and in the Netherlands, where it sold 750,000 copies in a matter of months. At its height, it had sold more than 3 million copies globally, surpassing the sales of Celine Dion and Bon Jovi, two of the greatest names in music, in some key European markets. Because of him, even major record stores began to devote greater space on their shelves to classical music. Insiders in the industry dubbed it the Rieu effect, and according to Universal Music, no other classical musician had more money earned from their recordings than him. He was reshaping the industry as a whole, not only creating music. It all started in 1987, when he took a gamble by naming his band Johann Strauss. He eventually disproved their claims that he was being haughty. Reviving Strauss was more his goal than replacing him. By the 1980s, Strauss's waltzes had fallen out of favor and were rarely performed. Still, Strauss's work has seen a 16-fold rise in performances by 2010, mostly as a result of Rieu. Even larger than Strauss's own orchestra, his group had expanded from its humble beginnings, with only 12 members, to over 60. On the occasion of the 100th anniversary of Strauss's passing, Rieu published a tribute CD in 1999 and expressed his profound appreciation for the composer. Even the Austrian government recognized his efforts to preserve the country's musical legacy by bestowing upon him one of their highest national prizes. Rather than merely performing classical music, André Rieu made it a worldwide sensation. Unbeknownst to most, he was a violinist in 2008 when he constructed and toured a gigantic facsimile of Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. This is a full-scale castle that accompanied him on his global travels. Real fountains, ice rinks, chandeliers, and even Vienna-style horse-drawn carriages were there, so it wasn't only a background. It wasn't for show. It was larger than anything the Rolling Stones had ever constructed. Rieu hoped that those who could never afford a trip to Vienna may experience its enchantment via his work. The logistics were just nuts. Every time he set up, 100 men would spend 6 days constructing the stage. Stadiums in Europe and Australia were filled to capacity as a result. His performance in Melbourne broke the record for the largest classical concert ever staged in Australia, with 38,751 people filling the Telstra Dome. Nearly 90,000 people attended all 3 concerts in that city. Just as quickly, he was selling out arenas in his own Europe. 8 of the top 10 positions in Australia's charts were held by his DVDs at one point. Only Pink and AC/DC were able to slip in. His concerts were so well received that Rieu joined the ranks of the world's highest-grossing tours, right up there with Madonna and the Police. This wasn't sheer chance, though. Not bad for someone whose stage name is King of the Waltz. And if that weren't impressive enough, he won more than 500 platinum medals for his albums and DVDs, a feat achieved by no other classical artist. Universal Music presented him with a personalized chrome violin trophy as a token of their utmost admiration, stating that their level of achievement was unparalleled in the music industry. However, not all things were shiny and bright. Tragic events marred an otherwise joyous 2016 Christmas tour in the United Kingdom. While living in Leeds, Rieu's long-standing trombonist Ruud Merckx had a sudden heart attack while sleeping. He and Rieu had been together for almost 20 years, and he was accompanied by his wife, who was also a violinist in the orchestra. Home was where their 2 children resided. This was like a slap in the face to the group. Without hesitation, Rieu cancelled that night's gig in Nottingham and promptly postponed the remainder of the UK tour, removing dates in London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Glasgow. The way Rieu referred to his orchestra as a family was sincere. He had a number of loyal followers that had been around for over 25 years. It was tragic to lose a family member just before Christmas. 5 days after his return to the Netherlands, Merckx died suddenly. Something had changed by the time Rieu returned to the UK in March. Even if there weren't as many people, the enchantment remained. What transpired in December was etched in everyone's minds, including his own. After decades of enchantment, 74-year-old André Rieu nearly broke down in March 2024 upon returning to Mexico City. He continued touring the world with the vigor of a man half his age until, after just 2 shows, his body abruptly gave out. The terrible combination of jet lag, flying at high altitude, and a terrible illness caused André to pass out. With its elevation of more than 2,200 meters above sea level, Mexico City forced him over the brink. The musicians of his orchestra were not immune. They also suffered from fatigue and nosebleeds. André, though, had it worse. He was exhausted, lightheaded, and felt, to quote himself, 110 years old. That evening, backstage, he contacted his wife and said something he had never said before. "I don't want a first concert day like this anymore." This was the first time the unstoppable performer acknowledged the possibility that he might need to take it easy. The performances were postponed. Forgot about 40,000 admirers. He had to go home, a man who took a great satisfaction in never missing a performance. In this case, the fear wasn't temporary. André had been fighting off illness for a long time. A viral infection in his inner ear caused him to lose his balance in 2010, which caused his tour to be disrupted and required months of recovery. Despite performing with a high fever in 2019, he kept his suffering hidden from everyone. It was different in Mexico. For the first time, he set out his fears that he couldn't hang on as his legs trembled. Upon returning to Maastricht, he made it plain that he would never again subject himself to such agony. After assuming the majority of the company's duties, his son Pierre went even farther. There would be no more draining overseas travels or straining to the limit when he began altering the tour planning process. A more intimate tour of Europe, maybe, was in the works. After that, it's likely I won't do it again. Now that he was the one ensuring his father's safety, Pierre had transcended his role as a mere company manager. By taking care of the personnel, logistics, and overall flawless operation, Pierre had gradually relieved André of some of his responsibilities over the years. After years of wanting to micromanage, André finally trusted Pierre. They had become closer with each near-death experience and health worry. To keep his father from having to put his life on the line for his passion, Pierre had quietly taken over as captain of the ship. However, health problems and artistic triumphs aren't the only parts of André's story. In 2015, he encountered an unforeseen scandal that had nothing to do with music. 11 kids from a Romanian band graced the stage during one of his legendary summer concerts in Maastricht. They performed with the legendary George Zamfir, who was in charge of an ensemble. Everything was going swimmingly until the Dutch government hit André with a hefty fine, EUR 236,000, subsequently reduced, but still one of the biggest cultural penalties in Dutch history, on the grounds that the children had worked beyond the legally permitted hours for minors. The children's performance ended at 11 o'clock, according to André's camp. They only returned to the stage for the curtain call and were formally directed by Zamfir, not André. The court finally decided after 2 years of litigation that he was not their employer, and they overturned the fine. However, many were surprised by the case, and it stained his reputation in the eyes of his detractors. André Rieu's ability to connect with people remained unbroken in spite of these challenges. André wasted no time in 2019 offering to restore the EUR 20,000 worth of gear stolen from a band of mentally handicapped musicians. He read about it in the papers and promised to replace everything without hesitation. No public relations gimmick, no major statement, simply generosity. After the fire that destroyed Notre Dame Cathedral, he even volunteered to donate 700 tons of steel to help rebuild it. Subdued movements exposed a side of him that was not often the center of attention. His priceless Stradivarius violin is another example. Problems with his finances almost made him sell it. To be on the safe side, he put it up for sale at an exorbitant price, but he removed it from sale as conditions improved. He is the violin, not the wood and strings. Presently, he performs on a rare 1732 model and ships it to Vienna for servicing twice yearly. It remains flawless when a professional artisan disassembles, varnishes, and checks it. Every tour has its own unique way of protecting it. Despite André Rieu's outward smile, the world's most happy orchestra is really a clandestine empire kept together by familial ties and some unexpected secrets. His marriage to Marjorie is the starting point. Despite the fact that she has been André's life partner for decades, most fans perceive her as more than that. Without ever receiving acknowledgement, she has been penning orchestral pieces. The music, not the limelight, is where her labor resides. As André rose to fame, Marjorie remained in the background, molding the sound, directing the vision, and encouraging him to forge on with new ideas when his interest in classical music waned. One of the most daring decisions the couple ever made, buying a castle that was hundreds of years old, was actually her idea. The phone call appeared out of thin air. A portion of Mere Castle, which dates back to the 15th century, was put up for sale while they were on holiday, according to their accountant. Marjorie was quite forthright. "Make more records," she advised. In an instant, the Rieu family had purchased it. It was more than a house. It served as the nerve center of the whole Rieu enterprise. By combining elements of Austrian, Bavarian, and Venetian design, André transformed the chilly, gloomy chambers into a cozy, colorful dream world. The castle serves as an office, a performing venue, and a place to dream. The music and the murmurs of family decisions that created the empire may be heard deep inside. The following generation is now entering that realm. Daisy, André's granddaughter, is just 9 years old, yet she's learning to play the piano in an orchestra. The Rieu heritage unfolds in this way, silently, gradually, via love and talent. So don't think this is an advertising trick. André has experienced the musical upbringing firsthand. His journey from behind-the-scenes worker to business director of the symphony was one that Daisy is currently experiencing, just as her father Pierre experienced many years ago. To avoid embarrassment, the Rieu family just opens the door, invites their children inside, and then sits back and waits for the show to start. Classical performances were no longer dull, lifeless affairs thanks to André Rieu, who did more than merely play music. It wasn't about formalities like bowing or tuxedos when he took the stage. It was about pure delight. The aisles were his calling if you were in the mood to dance. You had come to the correct spot if you wished to express your emotions through song, applause, or tears. In the 2010s and late 2000s, he began to advise his audiences against wearing ball dresses unless they intended to dance in them. He won everyone's hearts by making the symphony into an energetic celebration. Stiff attire, silent audiences, and regulations so strict that even inappropriate applause may result in a severe punishment were hallmarks of classical concerts of yesteryear. Rieu despised that. He was tired of the icy relationship between performers and listeners after playing in traditional orchestras for a while, so he decided to turn things around. His performances started to take on a more celebratory tone than recitals, with much of dancing, laughter, and even fake snow when the occasion called for it. This was astute behavior, not only defiance. Prior to his competition, even being aware of social media, Rieu hopped on the bandwagon, while others clung to newspaper ads and posters. Rieu had already gone popular when other orchestras were debating if Instagram was very casual. Not only did his Dublin rendition of Danny Boy reach fans, it skyrocketed, attracting millions of views like a top-charting music video. Going online wasn't his brilliance, it was his application of it. The music, themes, and substance at each stop on the trip felt tailor-made for the city in question. Through surveys, sneak peeks, events, and prizes, he not only invited fans, but also included them into the performance. Building community was the goal of every aspect. He leveled the playing field so that even those without a deep understanding of Beethoven's symphonies could enjoy classical music. After it, the film age began. After finding success with sold-out stadium shows, Rieu decided to take his concerts to the cinema. In his 2025 film, The Dream Continues, though he presented a tale rather than just photographing a scene. In a unique combination of home films, behind-the-scenes material, and live performances from across the globe, he takes viewers on a river cruise through his hometown. The focus shifted from music to memory, emotion, and transporting the listener into his dream. The norms of quiet and straight backs were also dismantled in movie theaters. It was going to seem more like a party than a movie night now that folks could bring their own food and drink. What Rieu realized was really simple. People seek authenticity, and he provided it. He had a huge fan following, and initially, reviewers were quite harsh, making fun of his hair and theatrics. Some thought he was classical music's worst nightmare come true. However, things changed when economists and business schools began to take notice. Rieu was selling out arenas and topping records, while other orchestras pleaded for financing and performed to half-empty rooms. What appeared to be gimmicks before began to take on the appearance of viable survival tactics. André Rieu has a far darker history than what the limelight portrays. Millions know him for his mesmerizing waltzes and friendly grin. The man who put in countless hours in treatment to overcome the effects of his father's cold and distant behavior is the real hero behind the sold-out tours and spectacular shows. Even his own father never once expressed pride in him, complimented his violin playing, or even paid him any attention. Because the anguish was too great, André did not attend the burial for his father. When he was a young guy, he saw his brother go away to another nation to get away from the same mental tempest. Although André is still emotionally scarred, treatment has given him hope for the future. Outside of the spotlight, André lives a remarkably mundane and realistic life. Even while his admirers think he's enjoying the high life, he's actually been discreetly amassing a portfolio of roughly 80 homes all throughout the Netherlands. This all began following a devastating financial catastrophe that nearly bankrupted him. His Stradivarius violin, along with all of his possessions, was once in jeopardy. He now puts his money into real estate instead of fantasy structures like castles and fountains, after learning the hard way that aspirations can be pricey. He became more wary after that, even if his theatrical demeanor was still captivating. Now that he is getting close to his 75th birthday, André is hatching a grand scheme, perhaps even a farewell bash. His hometown of Maastricht will host a concert series in his honor, but it will seem more like a goodbye than a celebration. There have been red flags about his health, including cancelled events and questions about his endurance. Meanwhile, he isn't prepared to part ways just yet. André would prefer give up his priceless violin than fire an entire orchestra member, according to his son Pierre, who oversees the production firm. It's a testament to his profound concern for his long-term companions. André, meanwhile, just shrugs it off whenever the subject of retiring comes up. Though he only half jokes about it, he plans to perform until he's 140. His dogged determination propels him on. He continues performing up to 100 concerts, year at the age of 75, all the while traveling with a personal trainer and worrying excessively about getting enough sleep to maintain his sharpness. He has heard from fans and even physicians that his concerts are like medication. Therefore, he sincerely thinks that music can heal. Perhaps it is the reason he will not stop. For André Rieu, playing music is an act of reparation, a means of preserving youth, and a means of rewriting the trauma he endured as a child.